everyone, I'm Selena Hill, and this is the new norm on Black Enterprise, sponsored by Cadillac. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Omar Epps, a three-time NAACP award-winning actor who has starred in several timeless classic films throughout his illustrious 30-year career, including Juice, Higher Learning, The Wood, and Love and Basketball. He also starred in TV hits like ER and House, and he is one of the stars of the hit series Power Book 3, Raising Kanan. But today he joins us to talk about his new young adult sci fi novel, Nubia, The Reckoning, which is about three teens displaced in a futuristic New York City after a storm destroyed their African homeland. Mr. Omar Epps, thank you so much for joining us here at Black Enterprise today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I have the books. The covers look absolutely beautiful. I know this one
Thank you.
is your second book. So tell us about the novel and your inspiration for writing it.
Well, Nubia was it's been my baby for some time now. I originally had the idea over a decade ago, and I've never written a book. I consider myself the consummate creative. I just sort of follow my ambition, and the story just kept speaking to me, and I just started, working away, and it sort of came from. The original idea was, we live in such a tumultuous world, and I was just wondering one day, like, well, what if love itself was illegal? Just like, what would the world look like? We kind of, as humans, you see this stuff, and you're like, what's it coming to? And I was just like, what if love was illegal? And then love was reborn through this, 14-year-old kid who doesn't know he himself is love, reincarnate. And the that's sort of where the story started to shape and form itself. And what if love was cousins with hate? And ultimately, you know every character in the book represents human emotion, and it's how all of these things are married into the human experience, if you will. And so, yeah, I felt like it was in the I guess in my mind it was in the future. So I was like, well, it's got to take place in the future. So it's like, well, what does the world look like 100 years from now? What if all these what ifs, right? What if these environmental cataclysms have happened? What has remained after that? How are we functioning as people then? And that's, not just the environment, but economically. What's the human experience look like? And it was important to me to tell the story through the eyes of a developing mind, and that's that age right there, 13 through like 17, like we've all been that age, or when you are of that age, you think you know it all, but you don't. But in the back of your mind, you don't, but you think that all the older people are kind of dumb. But and it's just that's kind of that age is where our ideologies are really shaped and formed, right? Because that's when we start testing the waters. Like we've been indoctrinated, if you will, with our environmental knowledge, meaning from our parents or family members, or we're going to school, we're getting taught this, and then at that age, you kind of test it out. Like, well, let me see if I put my hand over this fire, does it really burn? And then it's, well, how much does it burn? And and I think, and then I wanted to tackle issues that seem to be common no matter what the generations are, right? Like I personally think, and I've been discussing this issue with my kids as of late, but like the idea of racism is just at this point in my life, it's just the stupidest thing in the world to me, because as human beings, like we have so many other things to tackle,
Yep.
like so many other real obstacles, genuine obstacles to tackle for like the survival of our species, right? Like I feel like whatever happens to this planet, the plants, trees, flowers, the insects, the animals, they're going to be fine. It's us that has to worry because everything else seems to be in some form of a balance. a kinetic balance with each other. It all seems to have a divine poetry, whereas human beings, the human species, seems to go off the grid a little bit. And is there a such thing as a selfish lion? You know, does that even exist, or do you just eat what you need and you go about your way?
Yeah.
And it's like even when a cow is grazing on the grass, it's also putting back its dung to fertilize the next growth of grass. Not to be graphic, but that's really what happens. And so
Yeah.
as a species, we seem to be the ones that are out of balance. So that's sort of the undercurrent. But then, tackling all the isms, whether it's classism, like I mentioned before, racism, even sexism, and all of these things, and like unlocking our full potential. You know, it's kind of like the idea. Like I feel like every child is actually born perfect the way they are. And then we get indoctrinated with all this information. And if you ever look at the parallels between very young children and very old people, it's fascinating because neither one of them have a filter. Neither one has much patience, for different reasons. But it's interesting to me that you begin with sort of no patience because you don't know what patience is, because life is just coming and happening. And it's like, I'm hungry now, so I cry to let you know. And then when someone's in their 80s and 90s, they've spent their life appeasing everyone else. And they're like, look, I don't have much time left. I don't have time for the BS.
Right.
I don't really care what your opinion is. This is how I feel, and this is why. And I think there's something there. There's a magic there. So I wanted to sort of
There is.
try to try to capture that in these young developing minds that
Right.
that are sort of together and trying to figure it out, and then something awakens in them, that's a part of their lineage that they haven't been told about, but they discover it, in the story.
I want to get to, because first of all, the concept is so fascinating. You're such, the quintessential creative to even, come up and think of this and then to express it in written form is beautiful and fascinating. One of the things that you talk about is climate change, and I love how you said like us as a human race, we're the ones who are kind of messing up the ecosystem because it's the infighting that we have because of the isms, classism, racism, and sexism. But you touch on climate change, and that's a really hot topic right now, especially you look at what's happening, the fires in Hawaii, the unprecedented storms in California, and especially young people, Gen Z, they are fully tapped in because they know that the earth we and the older people are ruining is going to affect them the worst. So why was it so
Right.
important for you to tackle climate change in the book?
I mean, I again, it takes place 100 years from now. The story in the book does, but it felt so important to make that immediate parallel, something that the young reader of now could be like, well, hey, that's happening right outside my window. So that when they take that emotional journey, that the infighting, as you described, of now, they start to really focus in on what the resolutions look like,
Mm.
because the world will be here long after we're gone. It's just, what will the world be like? Will it be inhabitable, in the places that we're familiar with, or uninhabitable? And how will it affects everything. It affects our food system. I believe that when we see these things like, 1,000 whales or 20,000 fish washing ashore somewhere in the world, that's not by mistake.
Mhm.
They're being affected by something that is way out of balance in the natural order of things. And so I want the young reader to imagine that, so that the next generation of politicians and policymakers and things of that nature, that these type of thoughts are ingrained into their decision making. That at least we can come to the table and agree on X, Y, and Z. Like we're all, because if a rock big enough hits this planet, it doesn't matter if you rich, poor, tall, short, fat, skinny. We all gonna be in the same boat trying to survive. And so, what does that look like? what does that the functionality of the survival look like, and what I guess you should say what emotional baggage would we carry along with us in terms of our human history.
You and I are both native New Yorkers, and the book takes place in New York City. Why was that so important to you?
Well, I mean, you just answered it because I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised, and for me, imagining a different geological design of the world, it was just natural for me. It had to be in New York because I know that city like the back of I know the state like the back of my hand, right? So, I let my imagination take me, but it had to be a place familiar to me so I could be specific about, the levels of the ocean, and how that impacts certain groups, where people live, how people live, the foods people are eating. All of these things we explore in the book. Some less subtle than others, but at least the reader can, it almost feels like you're watching a movie when you read the book because it's so detailed and specific.
Speaking of watching a movie, will the books be adapted for TV or film?
That's the plan. I mean, as people keep reading the books, and the feedback from the young people has honestly been mind blowing. It's been amazing. And it's just about spreading the word, that the books are out there. And I think as people really make that emotional investment into the story and to the characters, it's only natural that we keep the Nubia world evolving, and I definitely have ideas for film and television and animation and a few other things. So
Oh,
fingers
exciting,
crossed.
exciting. So, I read that, or I saw that you said it took you 3 years to
Yeah.
write the book. Tell us about the creative process. Is it that, like, do these ideas just hit you in the night, and do you write it down little by little? Or are you more so like a perfectionist that has to get it right? Like, how did that process go?
I'm kind of all of the above. I mean, myself and my co-writer Clarence A. Haynes, he's been my co-pilot. He's a wonderful, wonderfully talented writer, and me, I just work off of the imagination, and what I wanted to do was I built out a mythology. So for me, this story really started a couple of centuries before the book starts. And I went that far back because I felt like I had to know why every particle of air exists in the book.
Mhm.
I had everything has to be justified. So I did that heavy lifting for myself. And once Clarence and I partnered up, he kind of gave me the parameters of structure, right? Because I've never written a book before. So even saying that it's a young adult Afro-futuristic sci-fi was all new to me. I was just like, hey, I got this, what I think is a great story. I want to call it Nubia the Awakening, and these are the reasons why, and so forth and so on. And then have a group of people like, oh, that's a young adult Afro-futuristic sci-fi. I'm like, well, what does that mean? you know. But in the writing process, Clarence sort of really it was a lot of homework to do, in terms of what has been familiar to the reader, what's new to the reader, how far to push that needle based on the age group that we're really going after, and all of those things I had to learn along the way. Because, and at the same time, I certainly am a call you at 3 in the morning. Hey, I've been thinking about, and you're like, it's 3 in the morning. We can do this in about 3 hours. And I'm like, no, you got to listen to this right now. So it was a lot of hours of phone calls like that, and meetings, and I think it all worked out for the best.
It's definitely did. So, what is it that you want readers to take away from the book?
Well, the main it's a thread to me, right? I think one of the main themes I want the reader to take away is the idea of unity, um, and exploring the levels of unity, because we're only here because we've been unified in some shape, fashion, or form, throughout all of history. And right now, especially right now, specifically in America, everything seems very, very divided along, a multitude of issues. But there once was a time where we could agree to disagree. And there was even a better time where people wanted to learn. Well, why do you feel this way? Or why is, this an issue for you? Um, and I think that when we keep that childlike quality, which is the wanting of the ability to learn, and then trying to understand, even if it's something that you don't understand or you don't agree with, you can respect that the other party feels that way about whatever that may be. So that's something, the idea of unity, I want the reader to take away, as well as the idea of heritage, um, knowing from whence you came in our bloodline is supremely important, because I think it informs not only your current footsteps but the path that you will set forth for those coming after you. So especially as a black person, there was a point in history where, I mean, our literal history was stolen from us. Our native tongue, the way we worshipped, the foods we ate, and all of this. But somehow, through our heroes, who are our griots, we kept our history going through the form of song, through the form of dance, through, like the fact that, things like, hog maws and all of these things are delicacies in certain places. Those were the scraps that were given, but we truly, as a people, know how to make lemonade out of lemons. So giving the reader that sense of um, cultural pride was very important to me. And at the end of the day, you know, kind of going back to that theme of unity, we have all of these buzzwords. Race is a big buzzword when it comes to ethnicity. But at the end of the day, there's only one race. It's the human race, right? And I think beyond that, once we realize that even in the capacity of living forms as human beings, that we're all attached, that we really are attached to, we couldn't breathe without trees and plants. So they have a life form, as well as whether it's a minnow or a shark. Every living thing serves a purpose here on this earth. And I think that the ancient world was way more in balance than the modern world is. And, there's something to be said for every time you look at like one of these futuristic movies. There's like super high tech stuff going on, and there's this very basic rudimentary stuff going on. And it seems like the people who are surviving the best are at the rudimentary level, like basic needs, like food, clothes, and shelter. And all the high tech stuff sort of takes on a life of its own. But it seems like people are really trying to get back to the basics. And I feel that when we correlate that idea to a time like now, it seems, especially after going through something as traumatic and as devastating as COVID, and we all did. At least when I've been talking to people in different pockets, everyone seemed to get back to the basics, family. Everyone seemed to converse and talk and do the simple things, just, preparing a plate of food for others, and that sense of giving, and showing up for people, for others, is what it's really all about. That's the only way we truly progress forward as one human race. And everything else is semantics. I think that whether a person is a believer or not, so whether a person is firmly, entrenched in science, or if a person's in faith, I believe that you have to have science. You have to have faith in science, and there's a science to having faith. So it's
I
a
like
blending of the
yeah.
two. And I say that to say that the earth is so vast, and yet we know like how much of a percentage of what actually exists on this planet, and that we're just one spinning rock amidst other spinning rocks. There's so much for us to learn and
Mm,
to absorb, that to be caught up in like menial stuff like the color of one's skin is just,
right.
again, it's just the stupidest thing in the world. And so I want to infuse the younger readers with those notions, so that they can skip past that and not carry the weight of that. Because the other side of the coin, to me, looks very beautiful. A world where those things aren't, prevalent, means we've leveled up. And so where have we taken our minds as one body at that point? You know, I think that's an exciting notion, and we're headed there one way or another. So I'd like it to be for the better.
Amazing. You know, most of us, Omar, know you for your illustrious career in Hollywood. We went through some of the names when I introduced you, but you've always been, again, a creative, a writer. I read that you used to write poetry. You had
Yeah.
a rap career. I read that you were in a rap group, and you are a producer. You produce the theme song for the Wayans brothers. Um,
Yeah.
that is so fascinating. Do you when you look back at your career and doing those things, would you ever want to do more? Like, would you ever want to pursue more music? Would you ever want to do more musical production or poetry or anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's just I'm an artist at the end of the day. And I feel like art is not only my expression, I feel like art is my weapon. And I mean that in the best of ways in terms of how to attack problems and how to help push the needle and inspire those younger generations, as I was inspired by, the Sidney Poitiers, the James Baldwins, the Maya Angelou's. Like, these people inspired me. I'm just a kid from a single parent household, super blue collar in the hood in Brooklyn. And, I was inspired by the Jim Browns of the world, and people who look like me, who carry themselves with integrity and would roll up their sleeves, whether it's the Marcus Garveys or the Malcolms or the Martins, as well as, the Gandhis, the Jane Fondas, if you will. Like, there's just a myriad of people who have put good into the world and have inspired me. So I want to pay it forward and pay it back simultaneously through my art. So all of the components of it, it's a mosaic. That's how I look at my career. It's pieces of a puzzle, and ultimately one day I'll get to see what the painting actually is, because every little thing that I do is just a piece of a bigger puzzle. And I've been very fortunate and blessed on the journey thus far.
Absolutely. And before we let you go, you know, as an actor, as a writer, do you have any thoughts on how the strikes can actually come to an end so that other artists like yourself can continue to work in Hollywood?
No, I mean, if I had that answer, I'd bottle it up and sell it. But we know one day, this period will come to an end, and I just hope, everyone comes out with a new perspective. It's not, to me, the Hollywood thing is a microcosm of a bigger issue that America is dealing with right now, and it's in my opinion, a lot of our systems need a firmware update, and we've been operating off of software updates for a long time. So even when it comes to, hey, I'm all for, the amendments in the Constitution and stuff like that, but we have to take into account that, gun laws, for instance, were written when people had muskets, not when they had, 100-round drum that could let it go in a second before you blink your eyes. So, you know, but these systems, or if we look at the difference between old energy and clean energy, it's really perspectives. But these systems have been they've been installed for so long, and they've made so much that the perspective gets skewed. And I was telling my friend yesterday that people are adverse to change, but they're open to evolution. And that's really a perspective thing. And we have no choice but to evolve. But a person will fight against change, right? Because seems immediate, but evolution is what it is. When I was a kid, I used to watch the Jetsons and these cartoons where they had flying cars and stuff like that. And now we have electric cars are normal, right? And so the things that people can imagine now in 10, 15, 20 years will be normal. Like in society, we, cashless, touchless, all these things, you know, just 10 years ago, you'd be like, no, you still got to swipe your credit card and pull out an actual bill. It's like, no, you can do all of that from your phone, right? Like, so it's just, again, I look at evolution as like, if you look at music, for instance, when I was coming up, you had LP, long play, you had a big record, and then it was like cassette tapes, and then it went from cassette tapes to like CDs. And, you had people, oh, you can't get rid of the records. You're not a purist and you're not. And it's like, the idea of, because I'm an avid reader, so every time I travel, when I was younger, I had to choose what books I was gonna, because I can't carry all of them. But now I got an iPad. I can carry every book I own in one device, and it's light, and I can carry it around. And people are like, "Oh, I miss turning the page." I'm like, the pages are still turning. It's just a perspective thing. So, I'm kind of a futurist in that way. I'm
Mm.
more open to evolution because we have no choice but to do that. And again, I'm really interested to see and experience at least a fraction of what the younger generation's world will be like,
Mm.
in 20 years.
I'm fascinated with that as well. Okay, and last thing, there's a viral video of you and Marlon Wayans in high at your high school prom where you kind of sort of
Oh, yeah, yeah.
spoke into your future. But
Yeah.
what advice you said you wanted to be, successful and rich, and you said you were going to be those things. With these
Hmm.
young adult sci-fi books, what advice would you give the young readers about believing in themselves and their dreams so that they too can, sort of follow your footsteps and live out their greatest dreams?
Right. I think, well, the main thing is, if you don't believe it, then it won't happen. You can't be surrounded by people who believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And the reason why, what I would say to that old video, I think I was 16 when that video was shot, is that because at the end of the day, I knew I was doing the work
Mm.
then. I tell my son all the time, the way that my life has shaped and formed, I've visualized it since I was 10 years old, and I took it that seriously. So when my counterparts were out playing, or things of that nature, I was really putting in the work and studying the craft and studying the business and things of that nature. And obviously, most of life has to be fluid because no one can control what's outside of them or predict the future. But when preparation meets opportunity, if you really put it in, because you can't fabricate the work, it's just an impossibility. You can cheat on a test, but you can't fabricate the work. Um, and then especially in the world of arts, it's a very unique space. It's unlike sports, because in sports there's a winner and loser. Right now, you and I could go to an art museum and look at a painting of an apple, and you could think it's the worst thing ever, and I could think it's the best thing ever, and neither one of us would be wrong because it's art. A painter could be classically trained, and then you could have somebody who just pours paint in a bucket and throws it on the wall. Again, neither one of them is wrong. So it's a unique thing to be an artist, but the you can't fabricate the work, and that's what I would really infuse into the young readers in whatever uh, their endeavors are, because I believe that there's an art to everything. When you get down into the trenches of it, whether you're designing a couch, whether you're a carpenter or a plumber, or whether you crunch numbers and things of that nature, there is an art to life itself. So in that way, we're all artisans of something, if you will. So it's about putting in the work, constantly, consistently putting in the work, and having the discipline to want to see the best that you can offer. I've never wanted to live a life of mediocrity and settle. I figure I'm already here, so the worst that can happen is I remain here. But what if I take a chance and take that chance on me? These are my dreams and aspirations. If I couple that with the work that I'm putting in, and then, put myself in as many places as possible that opportunity can bring itself about, then you got something. Then you got a formula.
Omar, please tell us how people can pick up Nubia the Reckoning, how where they can find the book.
Nubia the Reckoning. It is available everywhere books are sold. And I hope people go out and enjoy the book. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Again, it is for young adults, but it's a book that's for everyone. I've had a lot of adults, that have the child in them come out when they've read the book. They say it took them back, or it inspired them because they have kids or nieces and nephews and that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's available everywhere books are sold.
Amazing. Thank you again for your time, your contributions to the culture, and your artistry. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time.